So, hello there, AJ. This is Keith Scott Mumby. We've bumped into each other a few times on this symposium and conference circuit and so on, but this is the first time we sat down together, and I'm going to pump you real good for some information.
Long overdue. Let's get her done.
I know you're master of the game. You're the person to ask the right questions. So for the viewers and listeners, we're going to be talking about beta-glucan. Just give us a little bit about your background and why you're the right person to talk to about this strange sounding biological chemical.
Well, I'm a lifetime resident of this area, lived a short time down in Tallahassee, Florida. Married a young lady at that point, got her PhD in marriage and family therapy. We're divorced today. She made straight A's except with me. I'm kind of hard-headed. But we get along beautifully today. Sally lives up in North Carolina. I'm here in Columbia, South Carolina. And I first started working with beta-glucan 21 years ago, this July. And my background prior to that was in medical, but actually went to the University of South Carolina School of Pharmacy. We have a lot of Clemson fans here. They are like the arch rivals, Clemson and Carolina. And so whenever the Clemson people are around, I said, well, you know, while I was there in school, I was able to master the metric system, which very few other South Carolinians can claim. But a great school of pharmacy. What was motivating me at that point was, Keith, it seemed that every time my parents or any of my family had a medical problem, and it really didn't matter if it was a cold or sore throat, maybe an automobile accident, cancer, whatever. If they ended up in the hospital, they didn't really have good luck coming out. I was an only child, watched my grandfather die when I was 5 years old, prostate cancer. It swept through his body. I can remember even back then, you know, the doctor gave this big, huge glass hypodermic needle, Demerol, you know, the other things to help make him comfortable. So at an early age, I came into contact with cancer, and so I was interested. I was always good at chemistry and biology in school, and I had the idea that, okay, maybe this will be something that I can educate my family and friends and so forth about. My first semester, and what you do is you have 1 year of pre-pharmacy, and then after that pharmacy school, the professor for pre-pharmacy was actually retiring as dean, and a great gentleman. And I'm taking notes, and he's talking about all the drugs and so on and so on. And he says, by the way, probably 15 to 20% of the drugs that we're producing, now we're talking about way back in the early 70s, are being given to cover up the side effects of drugs that we prescribed 15, 20 years ago. And I'm thinking, whoa, what did he say? Now you have to understand, my father, who got through the 4th grade, and his father, my grandfather, I don't know that he attended any public school, were moonshiners here in the great state of South Carolina. And my dad would run the moonshine that my grandfather made. He never got caught, but he was never a good enough driver to get started in NASCAR, though. But he told me when I was probably 6 or 8 years old, I said, Daddy, what does liquor taste like? And he looked at me, he said, boy, he said, that stuff's for selling, not for drinking. And so I've had that flashback when the professor was talking about all these side effects of pharmaceutical drugs. And I'm thinking, hey, I don't want to be taking this stuff. So that's probably what was in the back of my mind as I move forward. But, you know, it didn't seem to have the kinds of answers. And even today, people go to the classically trained medical doctors and they get all these different protocols, whether it be with cancer or certain other things, diabetes, you name it. There don't seem to be a lot of solutions. The solution, as you and I were talking about earlier, just don't get that stuff. Don't come down with cancer. Don't get diabetes. Don't do these things. And that's a tall order.
Right.
largely to do with lifestyle, which I get, your newsletters and some of your books I've read, and you and I on the same page. We're just coming from a different direction. So that drove me to continue to look. And I don't believe that antibiotics should be used except in extreme situations. As far as chemo and radiation and so forth, I'm probably not as fanatical as some people are. There may be some fine areas, but I'm a big believer that the immune system, and this is call it epiphany or whatever, that I came to a little over 20 years ago, that the immune system is the only thing that stands between you and I and all these things in on us around us trying to get us all the time.
Right.
And
Well, a
so
good example of that, AJ, is AIDS, isn't it? I mean, we don't see so much now, but classic AIDS, when the immune system collapses, you age in a matter of weeks and you're gone. So that's how important the immune system is. But we're on common ground here, which I like, which is that orthodox medicine is now beginning to understand that nature is what fixes things and the immune system is nature, and we've got to work with the immune system. So beta glucans is just that one area, well, one of the very few areas where orthodox medicine is kind of holistic. It's like using herbals and naturals to tune the immune system. I mean, do you see that? Do you go with that idea with me?
Well, you look at just common TV commercials now have started to actually publish on products where the pharmaceutical companies now are looking to the immune system. If we go back to, say, Jimmy Carter as a prime example, a couple of years ago, came down with cancer. And they gave him a brand new, hot off the box product called Keytruda. Now, Keytruda is a targeted immune drug where they look at what they call checkpoints. Imagine if you're going down the street and you're going to get a loaf of bread. You're not in any particular hurry. The light turns red. What do? You stop. In some cases, cancer has learned how to hijack the traffic signal and turn it red. The immune system is an incredibly complex system of organs and cells and tissues and chemicals, but its primary job is to kill stuff and blow stuff up. And you don't want your immune system running at high speed 24/7, because it starts then destroying healthy tissue and cells, like autoimmune disorders, or maybe not as bad, certain allergies. So the immune system has these checkpoints really to keep you safe. They say, oh, wait a minute, there's something down there. We're getting ready to, open up a can of whoop ass here. Are you sure you want us to do that? And the checkpoint says green or red. Well, with it red, the immune system is held at bay and the cancer goes and does its thing. Keytruda turns the light green again. So that's an example.
Excellent model. I mean, an excellent metaphor, I should say. Okay, so now tell us just in simple layman's terms, what exactly is a beta glucan?
Beta glucan is, well, let's even make it simpler. Let's talk about glucan. Glucan is a complex carbohydrate. Now let's substitute the name paint. If I sent you to the store to get some paint, you might bring me back white paint. Yeah, but my favorite color is red. So you have to go back to the paint shop. You come back with red paint, and I said, well, now is this oil-based or water-based? Well, you brought me oil-based. I hate oil-based because it's so hard to clean up after. So you got to go back to the shop again and bring some water-based red paint. I said, well, now, did you bring me something that's kind of flat that you would typically use on a ceiling or something? Semi-gloss. Well, you brought me semi-gloss. Well, I can't use semi-gloss because I'm using it on the ceiling. So a simple word like paint would be like glucan. It's not really that specific and exact. So that's where the beta or the beta comes in, is it describes a particular way that molecule is formed. And in stereochemistry, you've got left-handed and right, dextrorotary, level rotary, whatever. Let's don't get into all that. But just to simply say beta-glucan, now you've got another thing to keep up with. These molecules are 6-sided and 6 corners, a simple hexose or glucose molecule. And the way those are hooked together, if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, if they're hooked together 1 to 3, 1 to 3, 1 to 3, you've got this long chain. But every 2 or 3 molecules, you'll have a side chain that comes out at the 6th terminal, and it's got another little tail hanging out there. So this thing makes a really tight, if we're talking about a 1,3,1,6 form, it's almost like taking a wash rag and squeezing the water out. It's very, very tightly wound, and it is not water soluble if you use the material that we use. Now, what if the source is a mushroom, or the source a cereal grain like a oats or barley, or a particular bacteria? They're hooked together 1 to 4, 1 to 4, 1 to 4. More linear. It's a flatter molecule, allowing it to be water soluble. Different forms, different numbers of side chains will go to give us different activity, depending on what activity. We're looking basically for activity for the immune response. And all of these having been measured side by side now, it's the 1,3,1,6 from the cell wall of Baker's yeast. Now, we have a proprietary form, Saccharomyces cerevisiae. You would call it Baker's yeast. We strip away all the fats and proteins, leaving behind only the complex carbohydrate. And the majority of that carbohydrate is the glucan. So I kind of went around the world to bring you back. Just saying glucan, or just saying beta-glucan, 1,3,1,6, 1,4s, it's like going to the store and buying a bucket of paint. You need a little more information.
Right. Okay, now you brilliantly explained the difference between certain types. And I know that, there's a fundamental difference between yeast forms and the mushroom forms. Now, historically, the mushroom forms, that's what got us going, wasn't it? And even orthodox, well, let's take cancer. These things are brilliant for modulating the immune system and helping with cancer, to the point where, orthodox medicine has grabbed one of these. Polysaccharide K, or crestin, is a major and well-known chemotherapy agent, and yet it's derived from a natural plant source. Now, 10 years ago, I would have said that, the yeast forms maybe not so good, but the science has changed rapidly, hasn't it? So bring me up to speed on why yeast is in fact considered better. You can get better responses.
Well, if you live in Japan, they're going to be cheering for mushroom. If you live where they sell a lot of beer and bread, they're going to be pulling for baker's yeast or brewer's yeast. Believe it or not, in Europe, there are companies that are harvesting seaweed, laminaria, where they're able, again, to get a water-soluble form from that particular plant. Now, if we lay up all of these different sources, whether it's the baker's yeast, the grains, the seaweed, the bacterial, and so forth, we've been able to actually test these side by side. Now, let me tell you this. If you've got a very, very good grain source, say oats or barley, and it's well purified, that is, you get rid of all those proteins and lipids and so forth, and you get the highest purity, I'm talking 90, 95 plus carbohydrate, you're going to get an infinitely more biologically active material than someone who's using baker's yeast that doesn't do such a good job purifying it. So purification without destroying the material is key to having the best material. But all things being equal, if you lay them all side by side, the research has shown without a doubt that the cell wall of baker's yeast is the superior material for source.
Right. Now, you mentioned purification, and I know this is your strong point, AJ. This has been studied by a professor at Louisville. Tell us the outcomes of that and why, the work that you do has created for us such a more active and powerful product than I mean, when we were talking before, in the preliminary setup, you used the expression all these gnats around there, kind of piggybacking the science. But I'm talking to you because I know you have the real deal, and I'm hard to impress. I've been professor at 2 universities, got 4 degrees. You can't fool me so much, and I know yours is the best. That's why I'm talking to you. But you tell us, the listeners.
We appreciate that. Again, 20 plus years ago, when I decided to go down this road, I could have gotten my own private laboratory set up. I could have decided to maybe hire private industry labs to do certain testing and so forth. But I wanted to say, well, look, if my material is actually going to be the material, which was, I don't care about who's second place, and nobody remembers. I wanted to put it in the hands of disinterested third parties who could care less whether I ever sell a pill or a potion. And so when you go into these universities, you go into these teaching hospitals, they're interested in one thing, the hard science that can be replicated in every time zone, in every zip code, not just in their lab, but before you get research published in things like the Journal of Immunology, Cancer Research, and again, there are a lot of I'll call them medical journals that maybe you and I could get together if we go broke and start a medical journal. Okay. There's some wild stuff out there. But if you go with the big journals, they're not just going to put junk science. They're going to have people that are true experts in the field tear that apart. They may very well go out and replace, redo that research. That's why in the materials and so forth, you see exactly where the water came from, what Erlenmeyer flask they used, what test kits they used, so that it could be reproduced. And so what they found very simply is that if the purification process was off maybe just 4 or 5%, maybe you had an 87% material instead of a 93% material, it may take anywhere from 8 to 16 times the dose to get the same immunological response. So my goal was to get the highest purity possible without destroying the material. Now we've become a lot more sophisticated over the last 20 years. We've actually now figured out how to unwind that that insoluble material and make it water soluble, get all of the extra stuff out. Now we've got a 99.999 pure material that can actually be injected. That material is now in drug trials with the FDA, and we're making very, very good progress. And we're now approaching 3rd level of the FDA process, and it's, I don't know if I'll live, but this may be very well written with a prescription pad of yours, given right alongside or instead of chemotherapy, radiation, and not just for that, but for you go into the hospital because you got a broken leg, instead of getting a massive dose of antibiotics as a preventative, you'll have a shot of beta-glucan in there as well. So.
Right. Now, perhaps you ought to reassure people who are watching us here that the oral form is pretty good. I mean, injection is better, and it would be great if
we've tested those side by side.
Yeah.
We know that if you take the water-soluble injection, right into the vein, the peak of immune activity goes up very sharply, like at a couple of hours. The difference between that and taking the oral material takes a day or two, but it still reaches the same peak. Now, having said, with the quick out-of-the-box Jackrabbit, it also goes down faster. With the orally dosed product, it goes up, it peaks in about 72 hours, and then it takes another 7 or 8 days, 10 days, before you go back to baseline. Now, unlike with some pharmaceuticals, you're not dependent on it. You don't go below what your baseline was to begin with. But some people will say, look, AJ, I can't afford $1 a day or whatever their cost is. Well, fine. Take the dose we recommend and take it every other day, because you end up with a peak that goes like this. Don't take a half dose, because your level of immune response only goes up halfway. Take the full dose and effectively cut your cost in half.
Right. That's a clever point. Thank you.
Well, we like I say, we continue to exhaust any and all questions relative to the product, its use, its effects, and like I say, not just with cancer, but the scope of the impact of the immune system activated by beta-glucan gets broader and broader every day.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about cancer specifically in a minute, but at this point of the blood levels, the oscillation has brought a question to mind. It's not just enough to have a wonderful product that you've got if it's not absorbed. So do you have studies showing that this stuff is efficiently absorbed?
Yes. You actually are able to use monoclonal antibodies. In other words, antibodies that only stick to this molecule. And so we're able to give the material orally, and then we come back day 1, day 3, day 5, and those antibodies then will register how many molecules. You can actually see these on different types of assays. The coolest one for the typical layman is you can paint these things. You can actually paint the particulate before it's given orally, and then they light up. When you look at the liver, you look at the spleen, you look at the bone marrow, all the organs and tissue, every place where the lymph system flows, the immune cells carry it, break it down to the water-soluble molecule, but you can still track it. Like on day 3, you can actually see pictures of the immune cells themselves, and you can see the little tiny balls of the particulate lit up inside. And then on day 5, you see that there's some disintegration, and you see an accumulation of light around the edges of the cells. And so I think that work was done probably 6-8 years ago. Therefore proving that not only did it pass through the gut wall successfully, but it successfully was taken up or phagocytosed by the macrophages and the neutrophils and other phagocytes. And that's when we really learned the true mechanism of action. How does the beta-glucan get everywhere? And one of the ways that the immune system does such a great job is sending out or releasing cytokines. Think of cytokines as chemical fax messages and emails or tweets. and these go out to all parts of the body, communicating with the other immune cells, and they respond depending on what the tweet's all about. And so if I get a splinter in my toe, how do the immune cells up in my arm know that? Again, it's through the release of these cytokines. It's a really, if anybody doubts that there's a God, you get a little micro photography of an immune cell, has no eyes, has no ears, has no nose, and watch it chase. Here's a scientist. He's got a little piece of material that's a target, and he keeps moving it, and the immune cell and he moves it. And the immune cell. How does he do that? And I tell people, I said, you've just seen God.
I love it.
I mean, it's an amazing thing to watch.
I love it. So would I be wrong, AJ, to want my liver all brightly lit and my prostate brightly lighted up?
Well, you actually end up peeing that stuff out. I mean, a lot of people drink Kool-Aid, right? I mean, same thing.
Yeah, okay. Now let's just dive one little bit more layer deep technically. Then I want to go on to what conditions we can work with this. But tell us about the specific receptor. You began to mention, being phagocytosed up from the Peyer's patches in the gut, moved around the body. But tell us about these receptors, because again, you do a great line in metaphors. So let's do your electronic key metaphor.
All of our cells in our body have different kinds of receptors. You've got marijuana receptors and you've got heroin receptors. You hear about that on the news all the time. And of course, the drugs to block, those kind of things, nicotine receptors. Well, they're receptors that respond to carbohydrates or lipids, or maybe a combination of carbohydrates and lipids with PSK crestin, which, by the way, has been an approved form of mushroom glucan in Japan and Taiwan and Australia, all over Southeast Asia for 25, 35 years. It is a protein-bound carbohydrate, and this is actually goes to the primitive way. When I say primitive, I don't mean stupid. I mean old way that the immune system recognizes invaders, like fungal forms. As I like to say, whoever perfected our immune system, which we kind of know, they made it actually more sensitive, more globally responsive to fungal forms than anything else, more so than bacteria, more so than virus, certainly more responsive than to cancer. And so it makes sense why a fungal form, like a yeast, would be a great source to be attracted by these immune cells. And these receptors I equate to the switch in your automobile. Now, what kind of car do you drive?
I just drive an Edge, an SUV. I love it. It's a great drive. My wife is the one with fancy cars.
Great car. I drive a Chevrolet. And the key for your Edge, if I tried to put it in my Chevrolet key switch, it wouldn't work. If I tried to put a Volvo or a Mercedes key, it wouldn't work. I've got to have the proper key to crank the switch. So think of that key switch in your automobile as a receptor. The molecule, our 1316 molecule, has been shown to be the best key to crank up that receptor and get the most out of the immune response without, and this is key, without overstimulating. There are plenty of materials out there, echinacea, I mean, there's a long list. You wouldn't take those every day. You might take them, if you feel a cold coming on or something like that, but to take an immune stimulant every day of the week would not be very smart, because you don't want that immune system in hyperdrive. Again, because what's it doing is blowing up, killing stuff, and unless it's got a target, that would be you. So
so your autoimmune disease and allergies and things.
So that receptor actually got discovered. Well, there was a couple of schools took credit. Work done at Harvard University, University of Louisville, and then they continue to do a lot of work. University of East Tennessee does a lot of work. Literally hundreds and hundreds of universities and teaching hospitals today. You just go on PubMed or Medline and you see the number of studies and see where the work is being done. So it is definitely a hot topic, not a one-hit wonder like some materials where you got like 4 or 5 studies back in 1986 and 2 more in 1989, and you never heard anything again except meta-analysis of those 10 studies. Some guys never killed a rat.
Cynical, but true.
Never killed a rat, but he's got all these things that are meta-analysis. A pencil whipper, as I call it. But it's a very understanding the mechanism of action is one of the things that I'm really proud of with our material is we really understand what it does, and particularly when it comes to the FDA, so you can understand and explain what it doesn't do. It won't prevent gray hair. I know you use the material that doesn't grow hair back.
Yeah, it won't cure ED.
It's a great material as far as activating the immune system. And without the immune system, I mean, the flesh would be leaving our bones in about 3 or 4 days.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got a wonderful natural therapeutic regimen. You've got the best and purest form, and we know it's absorbed well. And I'll ask you about questions about safety and things like that in a minute. But we've got this wonderful natural, kind of herbal, but it's related to herbal cures anyway, which people love. You know, they're very wary of drugs. AJ, what can we do with it? Now, cancer is one of the things. So tell us. I mean, this is one of the very best things you could do for cancer if you've got it, but don't get cancer is my best advice. Try not to get it. It's tough Absolutely. When you do. So how's that going to help?
Well, if you keep the immune system, and I try to qualify for folks that aren't clear, you've got things that are good for your nutrition. I look at vitamins, minerals, amino acids, essential fatty acids, air, water, all of these things we all need to build healthy bone and tissue. But a healthy bone and tissue can't protect itself. For that, we need the immune system. Now, people talk about, well, I've got a healthy immune system. Well, I'm glad. But the true question is, how good is your immune response? See, the immune response is where the rubber meets the road. If your immune response is down here and all your challenges are below that level, you'll never get sick. But the first time your challenges are up here, your immune system fails, here comes cancer. Here comes infectious disease. Here comes people that don't heal quickly or they don't heal completely. Here come the allergies. The aging process itself is mitigated based upon the immune response. People who smoke, people who drink, people that don't get enough rest, these are all lumber on the back of the camel. And finally, one day, that final straw, and boom! I don't understand. I eat well, and so well, maybe you do eat well, maybe you exercise, maybe you do all those things, but your immune response just wasn't up to that particular challenge. So, again, we want to stay out of the hospital. Can we say that our product is going to prevent you from never getting sick? Absolutely not. But what we have demonstrated with our human clinical trials, whether it be in children or adults, when you do get ill, you are not going to be ill as long. You're not going to have the severity. And when you look at quality of life, survivability, everything in regards to our cancer work shows you're going to come out better. I'm never going to sit here and tell you that this stuff is a cure for cancer, and anybody that does, you need to run the other way.
Cure be a strong word, but it's a very important tool that a person should bring in to help.
Here's what I can tell you. If you're taking this product, your immune system is going to kill more cancer cells. I can tell you that without a doubt. It's been proven, and that's a good thing.
Right.
More immune cells are killing cancer cells. You're going to come out a lot better.
Okay. All right. Now let's talk about 2 age groups. I want to talk about the older folks and dementia. I'll come back to that in a minute. But I know you're very passionate about kids too. Why should kids be taking this stuff?
Well, I think from the time that a child breathes its first breath, and the immune system that the mother gave it has actually been held in abeyance. You don't want a fetus inside the mama going into an inflammatory state. Okay, there's enough stuff going on in there. So the immune system is actually kind of put on hold, put to sleep, so to speak. And then once it comes out into the world, it begins to learn. You've got 2 arms to the immune system. One is the innate, that immune system with which we're born. And the innate system is very simple. It says, are you self? And if the answer is not yes, then that innate immune system is going to instantly respond and attack and eliminate. Acquired immunity takes time, as much as 2 or 3 weeks to learn. Now, there are 21 amino acids. Some people talk about 22. I'm not good at math. Let's stick with 21. If we take all the combinations and permutations of 21 amino acids, that's a big number. That's a lot. Now we bring in addition to that, the lipids. We bring in on top of that all the different proteins out there and carbohydrates. Now, the number is so huge. Keith, the day that baby breathes its first breath, that innate immune response recognizes all of that as self versus non-self. And then it begins to learn. It learns about asbestos. It learns about all the chemicals that we put, pollution and all the insecticides and the pesticides. So this learning process produces what we call antibodies. The principles by which, the vaccines and so forth are supposedly going to help us produce. But you have to, number one, you have to come into contact with this new material. You don't live 21 days unless that immune response that you're born with, that innate immune response, is up and running to the level to where the challenge is. And that's where the beta-glucan comes in. If you look at neutrophils as an example, they are the most abundant of all your white blood cells, 50 to 70% on any average day. They have the glucan receptor, the CR3. Your natural killer cells, a small percentage, but they are extremely important in surveilling for and destroying cancer cells and virally infected cells. You have the macrophage, which is kind of the big macrophage or macrophage, depending on which side of the Atlantic you're educated, is the big brother of the neutrophil. They live longer. They can stick around a long time and actually become what they call professional. They actually start to target eosinophils. So add up all the different immune cells that have the glucan receptor, that CR3, you're looking at 85, 90% of your total white blood count. T and B cells do not have, quote unquote, a glucan receptor. But remember those cytokines? Things like the interleukins, the gamma interferons, all these other messages that are going back and forth will target those T cells and those B cells, and it's like an orchestra. You have the conductor, and instead of a bunch of noise, everything is working as a beautiful symphony. Beta-glucan doesn't interfere with that. It makes the music sweeter. It makes it more of what it's supposed to be. As I say, more, better, and faster. So
you're the master of
let's
metaphors.
get the kids out of the gate with every advantage we can. It is dosed based on body weight, so the kids take a lot less to get the same great benefit.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Sorry, I talked over you there. I was saying you're just such a master of metaphor. That shows a sort of inner poet, I think. Anyway, another group I want to look at, particularly because a lot of people follow me because of anti-aging, and I'm a boomer that's still rocking and rolling, These are important folks, of course, and we all want to go on partying till our very last day. One of the concerns, almost bigger concern than cancer, really, is dementia. Nobody wants to lose their marbles right towards the end of their life. And I know there's a model here which I'd like you to expand on, but we're not sure what these Alzheimer's plaques and things are, but it seems very likely, and I accept the model as probably true, that this is the immune response. It's not the cause of the problem. There's some other cause that may be an infectious virus or some other agent, and the amyloid plaques are actually the response. But whatever the truth of that is, beta-glucans can help, yeah?
Well, this is an area of research that the well is not nearly as deep as it is, say, with cancer and infectious disease and healing and so forth. And I regret to say this, but the research goes to where the money is. Maybe we'll all live one day where money is a non-issue. We can just do things because it's the right thing to do. But the area of research there, again, is not as deep. But here's what we do know. We do know that brain is a privileged area. The brain thinks a lot of itself. And we've got that blood-brain barrier and so forth. Now, you've actually got glial cells, or microglia, in the brain. That's the brain's immune cells. And they have a glucan receptor. You don't have the free flow of neutrophils and macrophages and natural killers unless you got a hole somewhere in that blood-brain barrier. The eye, the spinal column, all of these are privileged areas, and one of the reasons is because they're so fragile. But there's definite evidence that when we activate all the well-known cells that I've mentioned, like the neutrophils, macrophages, and whatnot, that these brain neutrophils are also activated. Now, I'll tell you, work has been done extensively with curcumin in that particular area, and it's demonstrated benefit. Probably the most famous words of all research: more research is needed.
It gets you out of any tricky corner, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's none of these universities and teaching hospitals operate for free. They do get some tax dollars, but again, it's many times the benefit of that researcher to convince the school to continue to fund different programs. I can tell you that in the 20+ years, we've had a struggle every inch of the way, and probably over $200 million spent from private investors that have come in and helped grease the wheels. Today, you look at $500 to $750 million to get a new drug to market, and I'm kind of on record as not being a big fan of the FDA, but and I'll just make it clear to those people that see us for the first time. I believe that if a compound has been demonstrated to be safe and can't hurt you, you should be able to have access to it and be told what it may well do for you. Well, with food supplements, which, we're talking about here, that's not the case. We have DeShay, and the only thing I can talk about on the bottle on a website is helps to maintain and support a healthy immune response. That's all I can say. But before DeShay, back in pre-1994, the only thing I could say was, what's this for? It's for $29.95. So there has been some advancement as to what, but it's also opened up the doors to a lot of snake oil and snake oil salesmen that are going far beyond, and so we fight that battle as well. And so most of my work is trying to clear up the confusion that's in the marketplace. I'm not a clinician. I don't try to be a clinician. I am quick to tell people you need to find a qualified medical doctor that can run the test, actually figure out what's wrong with you, then we can come to a solution. But whether it's be with dementia, anthrax, there's some work. I don't want to tell a lot about it, but I won't say, but just a little bit. Retinopathy is a piece of research that'll soon be published, and we're able to show that diabetic retinopathy can benefit. So there's a lot of areas, like I say, that are, by the way, being discovered as we're working at key things. And I wish there was enough that we could look at every ailment, but we can only do what we can do.
Right. Okay. Now you've led just very naturally to a summing up topic. This is great stuff, does great things. So Just walk us through the issues. Like, it's not expensive, is it? How safe is it? And so everyone should be taking this. What kind of doses?
We've done a tremendous amount of work on proper dose. We know that with our product, we can actually go down to a fraction of a milligram per kilo of body weight. Now, everybody in the world does business by the metric system except here in the United States. So I'll have to, of course, say for the folks that are watching here in the U.S., 1 kilo is 2.2 pounds. Right. 220 pounder, 100 kilos. So if you're 220 pounds, 100 kilos, we recommend 2 milligrams per kilo of body weight, which would be 200 milligrams. That would be a very, very good dose to help you maintain good immune response. Now, what's our level of that? Let's say your immune response is down around 30%. Taking that dose of 2 milligrams per kilo, you're going to go up to around 48, 49%. Let's go to the other extreme. What is the maximum dose that would be beneficial to you? It's going to be roughly 10 times the dose. So just because you take twice as much doesn't mean you get twice the benefit. There's a bit of a curve, and at 20 milligrams per kilo of body weight, you're going to get somewhere in the neighborhood of 65 to 70% immune response, more than double what your baseline might have been. You can take a bucket full, that immune response is not going to.
It maxes out about that.
Really, that dose curve, and there have been many studies on that. We've got a lot of graphics on it, so it's easy. We got tachometers, we got curves, we got columns, we got about any way we can express it.
There isn't anyone in today's modern hostile world that couldn't use a 40 to 60% better immune response. That's great. So is this safe? You've hinted all the way through it's about as safe as can be.
We have dosed this product in humans at 30 times what we would typically recommend, only because they couldn't swallow it, anymore for their body weight for long periods of time. With animals, we've gone as high as 1,600 times recommended dose. We remove their livers, their spleens, their brains, examine, for any kind of inflammation. We couldn't get any human volunteers to do that, for $30.
Yeah. Okay, so
it's probably safer than the water you drink, honestly.
Oh yeah, but not half. AJ, it's been wonderful talking with you. You've painted a marvelous picture of a marvelous tool that we can all use and all benefit from. And I think everyone should. I agree with you. It's so safe and inexpensive, relatively speaking. It's so much to offer. I mean, you've got studies in certain areas, but I mean, I think we're allowed to extrapolate a little bit and say, even if it's not been studied, if you've improved your immune system, you're just better on every aspect of your health, basically.
I'd like to give just one plug.
Yeah.
For a person who wants to get into the deep weeds. I'd like for you can go to Amazon, in a number of sources. And this is a book written by Dr. Václav Vetvíka. He is a preeminent expert, not only in immunology, but he's one of the few people that I know that have longer years than me in studying this material. And I rely upon, these are the true heroes. These are the true people that are in these universities and teaching hospitals that are actually doing the work, actually providing the truth, the irrefutable, as we say down here in the South, baptized in fire. But beta-glucan, Nature's Secret. Make sure you get the 3rd edition, the green one. There's an early edition, blue, and 1st edition, yellow. And this is basically your handbook. It's got an entire chapter on cancer. It's got an entire chapter on infectious disease. This is Dr. Vetvíka in his lab at the university, and great guy, real sensible guy, real quick to call BS, and he doesn't mean a Bachelor of Science. And he is dedicated and right. I mean, there's a lot of, as you know, you're a prolific writer. It takes a lot of time and effort to put something down in print. And the funny thing about when you put something in print, people read it and they might challenge you. So you got to make sure what you put in print, put your name on, is right. And I know with the work you've done, I've not found one fault, and I know a lot of people who follow your work. And so I appreciate you spending the time to help get the word out there, and again try to get some of the confusion in the marketplace straightened out.
Thanks for helping. Thanks for sharing, AJ. That was great. I look forward to talking with you again soon. Real soon.
Me too. Thank you so much. I tend not to give a lot of opinion. I rely upon what's actually in the published literature. Most of the work I've done over the last 20, 21 years has been in association with major universities and teaching hospitals. So there's quite a bit of a track record. We're selling the product, of course, now in 60 countries, so we have a lot of anecdotes. But, you know, a lot of people out there selling, shall we say, less than good quality products have nothing but anecdotal claims, and not that those are no good, but
testimonials are not science, is one of my sayings.
Well, science sometimes is a little more stern than Johnny showed up, Johnny was sick, Johnny took this magic pill, and now Johnny's cured. And you don't even know what Johnny had.
yeah. On beta, I mean, one of the things I want to pull out is not just beta glucans are great, but most of the manufacturing processes are crap. It's all Me Too stuff, and that you know, Dr. Vettica's study showing your Glucan 300 was the best of the best. So we want to talk about that.
Yeah, we've got over 200 patents on process, composition of matter, and uses. So if somebody comes down from Mars and has a gaseous form of beta-glucan, they still can't make immunological claims because we have the use patent. So, but hey, you know, you've always got those gnats out there. You can't sue everybody. So what I've elected to do is try to educate people again that just because there's something on the label doesn't necessarily mean that it's in the bottle. And unless you've got disinterested third parties like these universities, whatever, that can attest to the fact that something is, number one, safe, and number two, is going to be of benefit once it goes in the body. You know, sprinkle it in the test tube is all well and good, but it has to, you know, it has to do something once it goes inside you. Yeah. And I'm a big proponent of protecting the kids as well. Let's don't wait until we're 30, 40, 50 years old and life has overtaken us with so much injury and insult that we now have to try to undo what's been done. Let's get our kids off on the right track and give them the best opportunity to go through life without antibiotic deficiencies.
Yeah, exactly. Now, have we got some absorption studies, AJ, you know, to show the extent to which it's absorbed? Not just purification, but
there's actually on that website a real good 2.5-minute video on mechanism of action. Now, there's several studies on PubMed that go into that, and those are, you know, available on the Vita site as well. In essence, the material in the pill is a powder, but you look at it under a microscope, you've got small, we're talking micron size materials that are taken up into Peyer's patches of the small intestine. They literally physically grab that particulate and pull it through. It's not an absorption issue. It's a mechanical grabbing, pulling through into the gut-associated lymphoid tissue. And this is where the phagocytes, macrophages, neutrophils, and so forth will be grabbing that particulate as it comes through. And then they travel throughout the body using the lymph. And so it is actually the beta-glucan is digested and converted into a water-soluble molecule by the immune cells themselves. And then they secrete that water-soluble molecule as they're making their way throughout the body. They release it in the spleen, they release it in the liver, they release it in the bone marrow. I mean, literally everywhere that you've got lymph, you've got the beta-glucan molecule being secreted. It is then that molecule that binds to that CR3 or glucan receptor. That's where the magic begins, is the activation of the CR3 or complement receptor number 3. Once that is activated, you know, you look at Joyce Zopp at the University of, at Harvard University actually said it best, releasing a cascade of immunological events that, you know, go throughout the whole body. No longer is beta-glucan the issue. It is all about what the immune system does, but now it's going to do it more, better, and faster. Somebody think, you know, a lot of people think, well, the beta-glucan kills cancer. No, no, no. The beta-glucan doesn't care about the cancer. Totally non-specific. It's all about that immune cells receiving that molecule. And it's like the key, I express it like the receptor is kind of like the key switch in your automobile. Our molecule is the key. Now I drive a Chevrolet. A Ford key won't fit. A Volvo key won't fit. A Mercedes key won't fit. And that truck will sit there all day long without that key. It's a beautiful truck, but it won't move until it's activated or cranked up using that receptor site. So people kind of then get a general idea of what's actually going on, instead of thinking that the material itself, the ingredient, is going to kill cancer or going to kill a virus. It's just another beautiful molecule that happens to be the molecule that activates that CR3.